I started researching this on the evening of 9/11, and then the following day, late in the night, I brought out this text, which is called "Who is Osama bin Laden?" And which, in a sense, outlines the response of the intelligence community, particularly CIA Director George Tenet, but also the response of the media, immediate response of the media. People like William Safire, writing in the New York Times, who stated, and I quote, "When we reasonably determine our attackers' bases and camps, we must pulverize them, minimizing but accepting the risk of collateral damage, and act overtly or covertly to destabilize terror's national hosts." And when they say national hosts, they're talking about Afghanistan. And so you had a whole series of statements which were made within less than 24 hours of the occurrence of these events, as if they had actually been written in advance. CIA Director James Wolseley was using the term state sponsorship, okay? State sponsorship of the 9/11 attacks, implying the complicity of one or more foreign governments, but in this case, it was Afghanistan. Later on, we started accusing Iraq of being behind it, with absolutely no evidence whatsoever. So that I started going back a little bit into history, to the 1979 covert operation of the CIA, which was launched in response to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan at the time. And we knew that this operation, which was at the initiative of, at the time of the Carter administration, with Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was National Security Advisor, that this initiative was an operation of the CIA, and it was specifically intended to recruit mujahideen. Subsequently, during the Reagan administration, there was an actual process of covert military aid to the mujahideen and to the CIA's covert war in Afghanistan. Not to mention the fact that the CIA was supporting the madrasas, the Quranic schools, which were set up in Afghanistan, which were there to create this Islamist freedom fighter, and which also was created with a view to destabilizing secular Muslim societies throughout the Middle East. And if we look at the history of recent years, we'll see how these mujahideen in various forms, freedom fighters or Islamic death squads, as in Libya or Syria, supported by various Islamist organizations, but always backed by US intelligence, MI6, British Secret Service, and Mossad. And so that, in fact, the plan in the early 80s in Afghanistan was to initiate a CIA-sponsored guerrilla program of training, which would be used against the Russians, against the Soviets. And again, I quote here, predominant themes were that Islam was a complete social political ideology, that Holy Islam was being violated by the Soviet troops, and the Islamic people of Afghanistan should reassert their independence by overthrowing the leftist Afghan regime, which was supported by Moscow, etc. So that was the whole thrust behind this. And then you have the Pakistan intelligence apparatus behind this. The Pakistan's ISI was essentially a go-between. The CIA covert support to the jihad was operated through Pakistani intelligence, and the CIA did not channel its support directly to the Mujahideen. This was done through the intermediation of the ISI, and this was confirmed by many analysts. CIA's Milton Bergman, who's a well-known author, stated, we did not train Arabs. Okay, we did not train Al-Qaeda, but what we did is that we handed it over to our Pakistani associates, and we established and financed these training camps in Afghanistan and Pakistan. So essentially, to get back to 9/11, knowing this background, knowing the role of Al-Qaeda in the Golden Crescent drug triangle, and so on, I understood that there was a relationship between the U.S. administration and its intelligence apparatus and Al-Qaeda, and that consequently the fact that Al-Qaeda might be a suspect in these attacks raised the issue of this broader relationship. Now, history has told us that Al-Qaeda was not behind these attacks, okay? This, I think, is fairly well established. History has also told us that there were underlying causes for the collapse of the towers, controlled demolition, and so on. It's fairly well documented. But at the time, on September 12th, in the wake of these bombings, or what appeared to be bombings, my first area of investigation was to look into the relationship between the CIA and Al-Qaeda, and my concluding remarks was to say, well, if Osama bin Laden is behind the bombings, well then, in fact, this may raise the broader issue of Al-Qaeda's relationship to the CIA. There's no question that Al-Qaeda was controlled by the CIA and continues to be controlled by the CIA to this very day. Okay, and consequently, to parade Al-Qaeda as being responsible for 9/11 was in fact part of a disinformation campaign, which was intended, of course, to launch the war on terrorism. And that launching of the war on terrorism is far-reaching in its consequences because it permeates military doctrine. It affects the whole perception of who is the enemy. It fabricates an enemy. It creates bad guys. It penetrates into the inner consciousness of Americans when they start to talk about international issues. And to this date, the war on terrorism is still the mainstay, and it's a little bit like the Spanish Inquisition. I've often made that analogy. It may sound totally absurd that Osama bin Laden is enemy number one of America, confronting this superpower with his Kalashnikov from a cave in Afghanistan, and that everybody actually believes this version of this official narrative. And it is an inquisitorial dogma, because essentially what it means is that the United States is waging a holy crusade in the name of combating terrorism, what they call the global war on terrorism, when in fact this is a pretext and a justification for waging a war of conquest in accordance with broad economic objectives, the oil and oil pipelines, definitely in the Middle East. But in Afghanistan, narcotics is also a very major component of this Middle East, Central Asian war.
Absolutely, that's absolutely correct, and I think the old phrase that the real action is in the reaction is absolutely appropriate in the case of 9/11, because as you mentioned, everything that has unfolded from those events has been it's almost difficult to think of an area of our life that has not been affected by those events. Everything from obviously the geopolitical wranglings and the interminable wars that have taken place as a result of those the tragic events, but also when we think of things like the housing bubble, which was indirectly caused by 9/11, and then the lowering of the interest rates, which led to the 2008 economic bubble and the popping of Lehman Brothers and all of that. So, and the civil liberties has been eroded, obviously, in the wake of this, and the ongoing shifting of the goalposts on the war on terror, so that domestic terrorism becomes an issue, and then, of course, we need to spy on all citizens everywhere, because they could potentially be involved in terror. As I say, I think there is almost no area of our life that hasn't been affected by these events. So taking a look at the broad range of things that have unfolded from 9/11, what would you say are some of the main thrusts of what I guess the narrative of what's developed over the past 10 years, and how 9/11 is still used as a justification for these changes to our life and our society?
Well, I think the main thrust, which is of course related to everything else, is the process of media disinformation and war propaganda. Because essentially what is happening is that realities are turned upside down. The lie becomes the truth. The lie permeates all official institutions, from the US Congress, the White House, the United Nations, the European Union. Okay, so when you impose a consensus, namely the global war on terrorism, with bad guys who are threatening Western way of existence and so on and so forth, and enemy number one, Osama bin Laden, in the background, and that everybody supports this, essentially what has happened is that realities have been turned upside down. People can't think anymore. Their minds are blocked. It goes into their inner consciousness, and the lie becomes the truth. And mind you, the lie becomes the truth, and the truth is then becomes the lie from the official standpoint. People who say the truth are then considered as terrorists alongside the alleged terrorists. So then you get into a situation where addressing the issue of 9/11 truth becomes conspiratorial. It's a conspiracy theory, even if the evidence is so overwhelming. If you say, well, how is it that on the 11th of September 2001, in the afternoon, the British Broadcasting Corporation, BBC, announced the collapse of Building 7, the Solomon Brothers building, WTC 7, approximately 20 minutes before it actually happened. And then they say, oh, well, that was just a mistake, etc. No, it's not a mistake. They had advanced knowledge, or they received news that it was going to be it was going to come down before it actually came down. Okay, and to this date, that remains an issue, and it remains an issue which is not really subject to criminal investigation. Okay, there are many areas where the lies are so pervasive, but yet if you raise those lies and you say, no, it doesn't make sense, people will say, oh, well, these are allegations which are not founded by data, etc. I said, well, look at the data, look at what happened now, and tell me what you think. So my response to your question is that the wave of disinformation, of lies and falsehoods emanating both from governments, from international organizations, and of course from the media, is overwhelming, because it is telling us things which are fake, absolutely fake.